Welcome to the Cyber Operations and Risk Management Briefing presented by Brianna Smith, a member of Team United Kingdom. This briefing was prepared in response to the Reverton ransom attack that is affecting the summit attendees. During this briefing, I will give a brief overview on the background of the case. I will discuss software assurance needs and expectations, key attributes of the software development lifecycle, supply chain risks and recommendations, current software vulnerabilities, software options and recommendations, cost analysis, and contract language. Prior to the commencement of the summit, each nation was responsible for setting up its own secure communications network. As the summit events began, Team United Kingdom responded to anomalous network activity that was detected on our agency's server. I have been tasked with delivering this briefing after learning that summit attendees are unable to get access to the confidential summit data needed for the conference. This briefing will serve as a synthesis of the previous events leading up to this current event. What is software assurance? According to the National Information Assurance Glossary, software assurance refers to the level of confidence that software is free from vulnerabilities, either intentionally designed into the software or accidentally inserted at any time during its life cycle. Today, both individuals and organizations rely heavily on the use of software systems to enhance day-to-day business operations. This increased reliability on software systems increases the demand for software assurance. The Software Engineering Institute led development of a software assurance core body of knowledge, also known as the Core Book. The Core Book served as a foundation for the development of curriculum and course guidance for software assurance curricula. Three main knowledge areas of the Core Book are assurance across life cycles, which is the ability to incorporate assurance technologies and methods into life cycle processes, assurance assessment, which is the ability to analyze and validate the effectiveness of assurance operations, and assurance management, which is the ability to make a business case for software assurance. There are 7 phases in the software development lifecycle. Although these phases are mostly consistent among sources, there may be some slight variations across different methodologies. The 7 steps are as follows: planning, requirements, design and prototyping, software development, testing, deployment, and operations and maintenance. The 2 most popular methodologies used in software development are the Agile method and the Waterfall method. Agile methods tend to wind together all of these steps into a tight, rapidly repeating cycle, whereas Waterfall method tends to take each of these steps in turn. There are 2 main types of supply chain risks: internal and external. Internal risks refer to those that are within your control, whereas external risks refer to those that are outside of your control. One type of external risk that could be directly applied to the series of events that has taken place are environmental risks. Environmental risk relates to economic, social, governmental, and climate factors, including the threat of terrorism. The anomalous activity found on the networks of the summit attendees was a direct attempt of terrorism. An example of the internal risk that can be applied to the past and current events are mitigation and contingency risks. These risks are caused by not putting contingencies or alternative solutions in place in case something goes wrong. By continuing to use a vulnerable operating system, the summit attendees created a mitigation and contingency risk. My 4 main recommendations to mitigate these supply chain risks are to establish a secure communications network, which has already been done, upgrade the computer systems to a less vulnerable OS, consider virtualization to minimize downtime, and create and maintain a proper business continuity plan, which has already been done. Currently, the Windows 7 operating system is in use. Windows 7 has many known vulnerabilities as well as patches for some of these vulnerabilities. These known vulnerabilities make computers running this operating system an ideal target for hackers. For this reason, it is critical to apply all patches as they become available and keep the operating system up to date. Some of these vulnerabilities found on the network includes Microsoft Server Block vulnerability, which allows for remote code execution, SSL and TLS vulnerabilities, which allows for information disclosure, Win32k elevation privilege vulnerability, which allows for elevation of privileges, and Microsoft graphic component vulnerabilities, which allows for remote code execution. There are many different software options available that can be used to mitigate the risks associated with ransomware attacks. One software option would be to upgrade the computer systems to a less vulnerable operating system. There are three main types of operating systems: Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. I would recommend using CentOS 7, a Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivative, which is stable and widely used amongst enterprises. CentOS 7 is open source, meaning security modifications can be made to the kernel as needed. CentOS 7 also has a large support community. Another software option is the use of virtualization. Virtualization promotes reduced operating costs, less downtime, increased productivity, and better means for disaster recovery. I would recommend VirtualBox for virtualization as you can host several different virtual machines that can run simultaneously. Finally, the use of an IDS or IPS can help identify a ransomware attack before it is too late. Aside from the recommendations that have already been completed, such as establishing a secure communications network and establishing a business continuity plan, the remainder recommendations should have little to no cost associated with them. For my software recommendation, as mentioned before, CentOS 7 is open source. It has a wide supported community. For virtualization, there will be no need to replace the actual workstations. You would just need to download and create the virtual machines on actual VirtualBox. For IDS and IPSs, there are plenty of open source options to consider that can reduce the cost of implementation. In this section, we will discuss recommendations for contract language that will be used to ensure that supply chain, system, network, and operational security were met. There are three main sections of the contract that needs to be addressed. Section C, Statement of Work. Section L, Instructions, Conditions, and Notices to Offerors. And Section M, Proposal Evaluation Criteria. An example of Section C, Statement of Work contract language is as follows. The contractor shall develop and update mission criticality analysis, vulnerability assessments, risk assessments, and identification and countermeasurement implementations for mission critical functions, the failure of which will result in either level 1, catastrophic, or level 2, critical compromise of mission capability. An example of Section L, Instructions, Conditions, and Notices to Offerors contract language would be, the offeror, as part of its technical proposal, shall describe the use of its system security engineering process in specifying and designing a system that is protected against external threats and against hardware and software vulnerabilities. The offerer, as part of the technical proposal, shall describe the approach used to prevent, detect, and respond to supply chain risk, including malicious insertion of malware, the program supplies chain for critical function components. An example of Section M, Proposal Evaluation Criteria contract language would be the extent to which the SSE process identifies and mitigates threats and vulnerability risks to the system mission effectiveness, the extent to which supply chain risk protection, detection, and response procedures and activities are incorporated into the system acquisition. This concludes the Cyber Operations and Risk Management briefing. Thank you for your time and attention to this urgent matter. The floor is now open for questions.